It's something that everybody knows how to do, but not a ton of people know how to do well. Hey everyone, my name is Amanda and this is DIY Design, where you learn to graphic design it yourself. Today we're going to talk about PowerPoint. I like to use PowerPoint as a design tool for non-designers because I do feel like it is more easy to use than a lot of other design tools, and it's something that most people already have. You don't need to go buy extra software. You probably already have PowerPoint or Keynote. So the reason I want to talk about PowerPoint is that a lot of people in their career at some point, whether they're a small business owner or they're a speaker or they're whatever you're doing, you're going to need to present a PowerPoint at some point in time. And the reason I want to discuss this is because there are a lot of mistakes that are made when presenting PowerPoints. It's something that everybody knows how to do, but not a ton of people know how to do well. So we're going to go over the do's and don'ts of PowerPoint and see what we can do to make our PowerPoints a little better. So the first thing we're going to consider is, what is this presentation going to be used for? That's something that we always want to consider when we're doing any sort of design. And so with a PowerPoint, we want to consider, where are we presenting this? Are we presenting it on a computer screen? Are we projecting it on the wall? Are we projecting it onto a screen? Are we presenting in a lot of different places that need to be really versatile? Where is this PowerPoint going to go? Is it going to be printed? So just think about what's going to happen with this PowerPoint. Before you even start designing it, think about where it's going to go. If you're projecting on a screen, for example, you may need to have more contrasting colors, so if the room is relatively well lit, you can still read the PowerPoint when it is up on the screen. It's something that I see a lot of presenters do, where they've got these really flashy PowerPoints where they have text over images and all sorts of stuff going on, and when they're in a room where the lighting isn't turned down very low, which is common if people are expected to take notes and that kind of thing. So if the room lighting isn't turned down very low, you can't see what's happening on the PowerPoint. So you have all this information there, which is another thing we're going to talk about, but you have all this information there that it's really difficult to read because there isn't enough contrast. You always need to make sure that your fonts are readable. This is something I talk about in every aspect of DIY design. Make sure your fonts are readable and appropriate. You want to make sure that the audience can easily read what you put on the screen. If it's important enough to go on your PowerPoint, it is important enough to be in a very readable font. Your audience needs to fully understand it and embrace it. So the biggest mistake that I see folks make in PowerPoint is having too much content. Your PowerPoint should be an accent. It should not be everything you're talking about. Right now, I'm talking about PowerPoint. I'm not using a PowerPoint. As you can see on my screen, I do have PowerPoint open in the background, but that's just for examples at some point here. I'm not using a PowerPoint to demonstrate my point here. I don't need it. When PowerPoint comes into play is when you really need to emphasize something, or you need to provide a specific visual, or like if you're doing corporate presentations, diagrams are often put on PowerPoints, and that's pretty understandable. But never, never, never should you have everything you're talking about listed on a PowerPoint and have your PowerPoint next to you. I've seen so many people fall into this trap where they're just reading their PowerPoint, and then you're looking off to the side, you're looking at your PowerPoint, you're not talking at your audience, you're looking at something else in the room, and you lose that engagement with your audience. If you also have too much information there, your audience isn't paying attention to you. Even if you have all of this text memorized, your audience isn't looking at you. They're looking at all of this text and reading ahead. Why would you put it all up there if you're just going to say it? You want your audience to pay attention to you. You use the PowerPoint for emphasis and for added oomph, but you don't use the PowerPoint just to have the PowerPoint. Another mistake I see in PowerPoint is cover pages or slides that are in between different sections. If you're not going to spend any time on a slide, don't have the slide. Just leave a black slide. It's okay to just not have a PowerPoint. If you have some things where you need to emphasize and the PowerPoint is necessary, that's totally fine. But when you go away from something that's necessary, just leave it on a blank slide. Don't go to like a section header or something like that, because then you're just flipping through slides really quickly and nobody's paying attention again. It looks unprofessional. You're just like, oh, let me skip this one. Let's go to this one. And you have all of these slides that aren't relevant. Why are they in your presentation? One of the tricks that I do myself is I use blank slides. I'll just do a full black slide, so when a projector is projecting it, it just looks like a blank page. The one thing about this is that you do want to let your showrunner know, whoever's running your PowerPoint, you want to let them know that there are blank slides. Otherwise, you can panic and the showrunner might think that the projector went down or the computer went down or something's wrong. So just give them a heads up that there are blank slides. But what this allows you to do is you can talk about the emphasis that you're trying to make on a certain point, and then you can go to your blank slide and you can continue talking about whatever else you're talking about without this slide causing a distraction, or before going to the next slide where you're again trying to make emphasis. Most of my PowerPoints have a slide with an emphasis point or a visual I need to show, a black slide, a slide with emphasis, a black slide. It's almost every other slide, unless I've got a couple things I'm showing at one time. But in general, my PowerPoints have very, very, very few actual slides, and I also have all of these blank slides in there just to create that visual break so that I, as a presenter, know that I have a break there. Under almost no circumstances, unless it's a quote, should you ever use a full sentence in a PowerPoint. PowerPoints need to be short and concise and have just the emphasis of the point you're trying to make. Again, I've repeated emphasis over and over and over again. That's the emphasis I'm putting on this video is emphasis. If you need to emphasize something, great, put it in the PowerPoint. However, it should never be a full sentence unless you're writing a quote. That's the only exception. But even then, you should be careful to use quotes that aren't too long so you lose your audience. You don't want your audience reading the PowerPoint. You want your audience paying attention to you, and the PowerPoint is helping you make your point. So I just want to show an example here. This is a presentation that I've given a number of times. It's about how your clothing works and what your clothing says about you professionally. I'm going to go ahead and full screen this so we can see how I've given this presentation in the past. So right here, I just have a black screen. I'd be talking to you about how what you wear matters when you're being a professional presenter, when you're trying to give the right impression to someone, when you're trying to earn a contract or earn a job. You want to make sure that your dress is appropriate for your audience. Just like in design, what your clothing is matters. And so now I'm talking about all of this stuff. You're paying attention to me. You're not paying attention to my screen. But now when I click through, I have a point to make here. So I've got 4 people. Each of these people has showed up for a job interview with you. The job you are interviewing for is a skateboard instructor. Which of these folks do you think would be the best skateboard instructor for your son or daughter? I don't think that most of us would choose D because D looks very professional. As a lawyer, sure. Let's see if I was hiring a media specialist that would run my social media. I'd probably look at maybe A or C. I don't know, B looks a little too casual, D still looks a little too professional. If I were looking for a lawyer, if I needed somebody to create legal documents for my new business, D is probably who I'd pick. But you see here with the PowerPoint, the point that I'm making is a visual point, and so having these visual here is very important. However, none of what I'm saying is written on this slide. I'm talking about it, and the PowerPoint is necessary so that we have the visual, because it would be very difficult for me to describe these folks and get the same visual impact, and get the same impact of the point I'm making. But I don't have a lot of information. Now if I go to the next slide, I'm back to a blank slide. I have more information to talk about. I've got more things to give you. And then I'm going to tell you that I've got 5 rules for when you're shopping and you're looking for professional clothing and looking what to wear for the day. And then I'm going to go into my 5 rules. Again, I start with a blank slide. I do like to use animations very, very, very subtly. So for example, all of this is one slide. I'm having the information come in one thing at a time, and I'm having it come in as simple as possible. I didn't add any flashiness to the slide. I didn't add any pictures or anything additional to the slide, just the key information. Again, I want my audience paying attention to me, not my PowerPoint. So as I go through this lesson, I talk about each of the 5 questions you should ask yourself when you're going through when you're creating an outfit. And then I do this, which I really love. Number 5, does it fit? And again, those were all animated on a click. So as I've been saying over and over and over again, PowerPoint is for emphasis. This creates a ton of emphasis on the point that I am trying to make here. Whether or not something fits is huge, and whether or not it looks professional and it makes you feel good. So having this point on its own slide as its own thing makes it really pop. But what I haven't done is I haven't created a lot of other visual interest. Nobody is paying attention to the font that I've used or the graphics that I've created on here. They're paying attention to whether or not their outfit fits properly. And that is the key thing that I want them to pay attention to. That is what I want them to focus on. So when you're building your next PowerPoint, for whatever reason, I want you to remember, who is it being presented to? Where is it being presented? Are you going to need it to be high contrast? Does it need to be really versatile? Reduce the amount of text you have on there. Make sure that you are the main focus. Get rid of any unnecessary slides. If it's just a cover slide, change it to a blank slide. You are the introduction. You don't need the PowerPoint to do it for you. Don't use full sentences, and remember to let your showrunner know that if you have blank black slides in there, let them know that they're there so that they know nothing has broken. If you learned something today, be sure to like and subscribe for more design content. To be notified when new episodes come out, join our mailing list using the link below. And for more content and upcoming classes, visit us online at amandalubo.com and go unleash your inner designer.